Aaron stood in his father's temporary apartment and watched him pace back and forth nervously. His parents were in the middle of their divorce proceedings, and his father knew how unlikely it was for him to get custody of his son. Aaron knew that this was likely one of the last times he'd get to spend with his dad before the divorce was finalized, and he was sent to live with his mother. He wanted both of his parents to be happy, but really loved spending time with his dad. He watched curiously as his father reached into a duffel bag and pulled out a shriveled-up monkey paw. "Son, I know this whole thing has been hard for you. No child should have to watch their parents fight like this. And I'm sorry we're putting you through this. Your mom wants to make it very hard for me to spend time with you, but I wanted to ask you, do you want to live with me or her?" Aaron thought about it for a second and wondered what this had to do with the monkey paw his father was holding. But his decision was made up a long time ago. "I want to live with you, Dad. I don't want Mommy to stop us from hanging out." Aaron's father smiled at his son's words. He knelt down and showed him the strange relic. "I'm glad to hear it, son. Unfortunately, the courts don't seem likely to give me custody, so I'm using this as a last resort. It was passed down from my great-grandfather, and my family always told me stories about how it could grant wishes, but I never really believed them. I still don't, but I figure it's worth a shot. What do you say? Should we make a wish?" "Yeah, Dad," Aaron exclaimed, beginning to get excited at the idea of a magic heirloom. He took the paw out of his father's hands and held it up, nervously thinking about how he wanted to word his wish. With a deep breath, he said, "I wish Mommy couldn't keep me and Dad apart." They both watched in shock as one of the dried fingers curled up, unleashing a wave of ominous energy through the living room. It wasn't long before Aaron began to tremble, feeling the strange energy seep into his body. "Dad, I feel weird," he said, as subtle signs of maturity began to spread across the oblivious boy. His muscles grew dense as he felt a pressure building in his bones, like they were slowly being pushed outwards. Before his father could respond, the changes grew more violent, aggressively aging him up into a teenager in a matter of seconds. He winced as he felt his limbs growing and filling with adolescent strength. His spine extended as his legs grew long, pushing him up to his father's height and lifting his childish clothes up to reveal his maturing midriff. His hair grew long and messy as his jaw dropped open in shock. He grabbed his head in confusion and looked at his awestruck father with fear in his eyes. "Dad? What's happening to me?" he squeaked out between voice cracks. I don't know. This isn't what we wished for," he said, trying to make sense of what was happening to his now teenage son. He braced himself for his son's continued transformation, expecting him to grow into an adult man, but the next changes only served to confuse the both of them even more. "It hurts. Ack!" Aaron screamed as his frame continued to shift. His hips widened with a sickening pop, expanding out to childbearing proportions as his knees buckled inwards. His thickening thighs began to rub against his boyhood, sending more confusing feelings through the boy's mind as he contended with accelerated puberty. He could feel something happening to the guts above his crotch as his spine extended, leaving him with a smooth, feminine midriff and tearing his shirt in the process. He grimaced as his insides shifted around, almost as if they were making room for something. His spine cracked again, pushing his swelling butt out and his tingling chest forward. Layers of fat rushed to both areas, swelling his ass until it could have torn his jeans wide open and pushing his engorging nipples up against his stretching shirt. He let out more muffled moans as foreign tingles of pleasure surged across his body, each acknowledgement of pleasure seemingly making his breasts grow faster. His breathing grew heavy as his moans turned feminine, the jiggling of his new chest becoming harder to ignore with each passing second. His growing breasts tore open his shirt, giving both him and his father a view of his enlarging cleavage. He grabbed a clump of his hair as he felt more changes, shocked to find that it had grown soft and silky with a feminine scent. His eyes began to roll back as the pleasure intensified, his expression of fear contorting into one of confused ecstasy. He unconsciously ran a manicured hand down his growing curves and onto his crotch as a warm tingling began to build between his legs. "Daddy, I feel so weird," he said, unsuccessfully trying to hide the pleasure he was experiencing with a continually feminizing voice. His father continued to watch in shock, disgusted with himself for even feeling the slightest bit of arousal at his son's transformation. Aaron's voice had grown deep and sultry, bouncing off the apartment walls with increasing intensity as his transformation progressed. The changing boy fell back onto the couch as he continued to mature, his hair growing down past his shoulders as his face cracked and elongated. He winced in discomfort as his skull aged and shifted, his tongue darting around his mouth as his teeth grew into a perfect smile. His lips thickened as his nose grew petite and feminine. Finally, his eyelashes fluttered as makeup applied itself to his new visage, leaving him looking like a woman in her late 30s. He braced himself against the couch cushions and reluctantly let out more sensual moans as his chest continued to inflate, leaving him with a bust size that any woman would be jealous of. His new boobs bounced up and down in sync with his increasingly rapid breathing as he felt the sensations between his legs intensifying. With a sudden burst of alien ecstasy, he arched his back and let out an orgasmic moan, much to his father's dismay. His mind was racing as his boyhood slipped between his legs, stimulating his feminine new sex as it went. He was disgusted with himself, knowing that this was all wrong and that he was a boy. But the feelings of his old junk morphing into a brand new reproductive system were feelings that his young mind didn't know how to handle. The nerves of his new clit, the aching of his new vaginal walls, the pumping of his new ovaries, and the warmth of his growing womb all translated to sexual pleasure within his aging mind. His father watched in reluctance as Aaron's nipples hardened through his white shirt, unwillingly imagining what his son was feeling throughout this whole process. Oh God, Daddy, I can feel it in my head. It feels, amazing. Aaron trailed off, his lips beginning to curl into a smile. His father watched in horror as his quivering son reached up to rub his temples like he was massaging years of life into his mind. He looked down as the tattered clothes began to restitch themselves into something that a confident MILF would wear around town. It looked like Aaron tried to resist the new memories and desires flooding his mind, but it didn't take long for the allure of his new life to take root. His long brown hair turned a shade of dirty blonde as his memories of growing up with his father faded away. Memories of his father's face, voice, and scent were associating themselves with new memories in his mind, like going on dates and spending nights playing in bed. His new pussy quivered in lust as a lifetime of sexual experience touched every part of his maturing brain. His gag reflex was muted as he remembered the countless times he'd deep-throated some cute guy's cock. His nipples tickled as memories of men playing with them and sucking on them bled through his once innocent mind. Childish recollections of playing catch with his father or going to the movies were morphing into vivid memories of his father spreading her legs and plunging his face and tongue into her pussy. He reveled in the joy of being grabbed from behind and penetrated by someone she loved so deeply. She was ready to give in to her new life, and with a satisfied sigh and a smiling moan of ecstasy, Erin became Erin, the loving wife of her former father. "Oh, God, yes, I've never felt this good before," Erin moaned as her clothes finished restitching themselves. She stood up as her spinning head began to settle down, the remainder of her life being filled in by the residual magic in the air. Jewelry and accessories adorned her stunning body as she felt little memories of all the gifts her husband bought her populate her mind. Erin's father stepped back as the impossibly beautiful woman approached him, her hypnotizing blue eyes locking with his. He began to feel his fear and confusion fading away as she walked towards him, her smile putting him at ease. Her perfume filled his nostrils, awakening feelings of love for the new woman from the back of his mind, like lost memories. He began to understand Erin's wish, and realized that the magic had worked in its own twisted way. He didn't have to worry about custody anymore. Erin was his new wife, and the divorce proceedings had ended years ago. He couldn't be happier with his new wife, and she couldn't be happier to spend the rest of her life with him. "Oh, Daddy, hey. Sorry, Danny, I'm so glad you let me use that wish. Now there's nothing your bitch of an ex-wife can do to keep us apart," Erin said, raising her hand to show off the stunning wedding band her husband had given her. He smiled back at her, his love for his new wife growing with every passing moment. He loved making her smile, but felt a growing desire for something a little less material. She loved how much he spoiled her, but deep down she knew that they both wanted something more. "Babe, now that that's all behind us, I think it's time to start a family of our own." After all, I'm not getting any younger.